Welcome back to Nightlight Audio. We are returning to Stephen Crane's The Open Boat as the dinghy turns toward land. "Cook," remarked the captain, "there don't seem to be any signs of life about your house of refuge." "No," replied the cook. "Funny they don't see us." A broad stretch of lowly coast lay before the eyes of the men. It was low dunes topped with dark vegetation. The roar of the surf was plain, and sometimes they could see the white lip of a wave as it spun upon the beach. A tiny house was blocked out black upon the sky. Southward, the slim lighthouse lifted its grey length. Tide, wind, and waves were swinging the dinghy northward. "Funny they don't see us," said the men. The surf's roar was here dulled, but its tone was nevertheless thunderous and mighty. As the boat swam over the great rollers, the men sat listening to this roar. "We'll swamp for sure," said everybody. It is fair to say here that there was not a life-saving station within 20 miles in either direction, but the men did not know this fact, and in consequence, they made dark and opprobrious remarks concerning the eyesight of the nation's lifesavers. 4 scowling men sat in a dinghy and surpassed records in the invention of epithets. "Funny they don't see us." The light-heartedness of the former time had completely faded. To their sharpened minds, it was easy to conjecture pictures of all kinds of incompetency and blindness, and indeed cowardice. There was the shore of the populous land, and it was bitter and bitter to them that from it came no sign. "Well," said the captain ultimately, "I suppose we'll have to make a try for ourselves. If we stay out here for too long, we'll none of us have the strength left to swim after the boat swamps." And so the oiler, who was at the oars, turned the boat straight for the shore. There was a sudden tightening of muscles. There was some thinking. "If we don't all get ashore," said the captain, "if we don't all get ashore, I suppose you fellows know where to send news of my finish?" They then briefly exchanged some addresses and admonitions. As for reflections of the men, there was a great deal of rage in them. Perchance they might be formulated thus: "If I am going to be drowned, if I am going to be drowned, if I am going to be drowned, why, in the name of the 7 mad gods who rule the sea, was I allowed to come thus far and contemplate sand and trees? Was I brought here merely to have my nose dragged away as I was about to nibble the sacred cheese of life? It is preposterous. If this old ninny woman Fate can't do any better than this, she should be deprived of the management of men's fortunes. She is an old hen who knows not her intention. If she has decided to drown me, why did she not do it at the beginning and save me all of this trouble? This whole affair is absurd. But no, she cannot mean to drown me. She dare not drown me. She cannot drown me, not after all of this work." Afterward, the man might have had an impulse to shake his fist at the clouds. "Just you drown me now, and then hear what I call you." The billows that came at this time were more formidable. They seemed always just about to break and roll over the little boat in a turmoil of foam. There was a preparatory and long growl in the speech of them. No mind unused to the sea would have concluded that the dinghy could ascend these sheer heights in time. The shore was still afar. The oiler was a wily surfman. "Boys," he said swiftly, "she won't live 3 minutes more, and we're too far out to swim. Shall I take her to sea again, Captain?" "Yes, go ahead," said the captain. This oiler, by a series of quick miracles and fast and steady oarsmanship, turned the boat in the middle of the surf and took her safely to sea again. There was considerable silence as the boat bumped over furrowed sea to deeper water. Then somebody in gloom spoke. "Well, anyhow, they must have seen us from the shore by now." The gulls went in slanting flight up the wind toward the grey, desolate east. A squall, marked by dingy clouds, and clouds brick red, like smoke from a burning building, appeared from the southeast. "What do you think of those life-saving people? Aren't they peaches? Funny they haven't seen us." Maybe they think we're out here for sport. Maybe they think we're fishing. Maybe they think we're all damned fools. It was a long afternoon. A changed tide tried to force them southward, but wind and wave said northward. Far ahead, where the coastline, sea and the sky formed their mighty angle, there were little dots which seemed to indicate a city upon the shore. St. Augustine? The captain shook his head. It's too near the Mosquito Inlet. And the oiler road, and then the correspondent road, then the oiler road. It was weary business. The human back can become a seat of more aches and pains than are registered in books for the composite anatomy of a regiment. It is a limited area, but can become quite the theatre of innumerable muscular conflicts, tangles, wrenches, knots, and other comforts. "Did you ever like to row, Billy?" asked the correspondent. "No," said the oiler. "Hang it." When one exchanged the rowing seat for a place in the bottom of the boat, he suffered a bodily depression that caused him to be careless in everything, save an obligation to wiggle one finger. There was cold seawater swashing to and fro in the boat, and he lay in it. His head, pillowed upon a thwart, was within an inch of the swirl of a wave's crest, and sometimes a particularly obstreperous sea came inboard and drenched him once more. But these matters did not annoy him. It is almost certain that if the boat had capsized, he would have tumbled comfortably out upon the sea, as if he felt sure it was a great soft mattress. "Look, there's a man on the shore." "Where?" "There. You see him? You see him?" "Yeah, sure. He's walking along. And now he's stopped. Look, he's facing us. He's waving at us." "So he is, by thunder." "Ah, now we're all right. Now we're all right. There'll be a boat out here for us in half an hour." "He's going on. He's running. He's going up to that house there." The remote beach seemed lower than the sea, and it required a searching glance to discern the little black figure. The captain saw a floating stick and they rowed toward it. A bath towel was by some weird chance in the boat, and tying this to the stick, the captain waved it. The oarsman did not dare turn his head, so he was obliged to ask questions. "What is he doing now?" "He's standing still again. He's looking, I think. There he goes again, toward the house. No, now he's stopped again." "Is he waving at us?" "No, not now. He was, though. Look, there comes another man. He's running. Look at him go, would you? Why, he's on a bicycle. Now he's met the other man. Now they're both waving at us. Look. There comes something up the beach. What the devil is that thing? Why, it looks like a boat. Why, certainly it's a boat. No, it's on wheels. Oh, so it is. Well, that must be the lifeboat. They drag them along the shore on a wagon. That's the lifeboat for sure. No, it's an omnibus. I tell you, it's a lifeboat. It's not, it's an omnibus. I can see it plain. See? One of those big hotel omnibuses. By thunder, you're right. It's an omnibus. Sure as fate. What do you suppose they're doing with an omnibus? Maybe they're going around collecting the life crew, hey? That's it, likely. Look. There was a fellow waving a little black flag. He's standing on the step of the omnibus. There come those other two fellows. Now they're all talking together. Look at the fellow with the flag. Maybe he ain't waving it. That ain't a flag, is it? That's his coat. Why, certainly that's his coat. So it is, it's his coat. He's taken it off and is waving it around his head. But would you look at him swing it? Oh, say, there isn't any life-saving station there. There's just a winter resort hotel omnibus that has brought over some of the boarders to see us drown. What's the idiot with the coat mean? What's he signalling anyhow? It looks as if he were trying to tell us to go north. There must be a life-saving station up there. No, he thinks we're fishing. Just giving us a merry hand, see. Ah, there, Willie. Well, I wish I could make something out of those signals. What do you suppose he means? He don't mean anything. He's just playing. Well, if he'd just signal us to try the surf again, Or go to sea and wait? Or go north? Or go south? Or go to hell? There would be some reason to it. But look at him. He just stands there and keeps his coat revolving like a wheel. What an ass. There come more people. Now there's quite a mob. Look, isn't that a boat? Where? Oh, I see what you mean. No, that's no boat. That fellow's still waving his coat. He must think we like to see him do that. Why don't he quit it? It doesn't mean anything. I don't know. I think he's trying to make us go north. It must be that there's a life-saving station there somewhere. Say, he ain't tired yet. Look at him wave. I wonder how long he can keep that up. He's been revolving his coat ever since he caught sight of us. He's an idiot. Why aren't they getting men to bring a boat out? A fishing boat or one of those big yawls? They could come out here all right. Why didn't he do something? Oh, it's all right now. They'll have a boat out here for us in less than no time, now that they've seen us. A faint yellow tone came into the sky over the low land. The shadows on the sea slowly deepened, and the wind bore a coldness with it, and the men began to shiver. Holy smoke, said one, allowing his voice to express his impious mood. If we keep on monkeying out here, if we've got to flounder out here all night. Oh, well, we'll never have to stay out here all night. Don't worry. They've seen us now, and it won't be long before they come chasing out after us. The shore grew dusky. The man waving a coat blended gradually into its gloom, and it swallowed in the same manner the omnibus and the group of people. The spray, when it dashed uproariously over the side, made the voyagers shrink and swear like men who were being branded. I'd like to catch the chump who waved the coat. I feel like soaking him one, just for luck. Why? What did he do? Oh, nothing, but he seemed so damn cheerful. In the meantime, the oiler rowed, and then the correspondent rowed, and then the oiler rowed. Grey-faced and bowed forward, they mechanically, turn by turn, plied the leaden oars. The form of the lighthouse had vanished from the southern horizon, but finally a pale star appeared, just lifting from the sea. The streaked saffron in the west passed before the all-merging darkness, and the sea to the east was black. The land had vanished, and was expressed only by low and drear thunder of the surf. If I am going to be drowned, if I am going to be drowned, if I am going to be drowned, why, in the name of the 7 mad gods who rule the sea, was I allowed to come thus far and contemplate the sand in the trees? Was I brought here merely to have my nose dragged away as I was about to nibble upon the sacred cheese of life? The patient captain, drooped over the water jar, was sometimes obliged to speak to the oarman. Keep her head up, keep her head up. Keeping her head up, sir. The voices were weary and low. This was surely a quiet evening. All save the oarman lay heavily and listlessly in the boat's bottom. As for him, his eyes were just capable of noting the tall black waves that swept forward in a most sinister silence, save for an occasional subdued growl of a crest. The cook's head was on a thwart, and he looked without interest at the water under his nose. He was deep in other scenes. Finally he spoke. "Billy," he murmured, dreamfully, "what kind of pie do you like best?" "Pie," said the oiler and the correspondent, agitatedly. "Don't talk about those things, blast you." "Well," said the cook, "I was just thinking about ham sandwiches, and..." A night on the sea in an open boat is a long night. As darkness settled finally, the shine of the light, lifting from the sea in the south, changed to full gold. On the northern horizon a new light appeared, a small bluish gleam on the edge of the waters. These 2 lights were the furniture of the world. Otherwise, there was nothing but waves. 2 men huddled in the stern, and distances were so magnificent in the dinghy that the rower was enabled to keep his feet partially warmed by thrusting them under his companions. Their legs indeed extended far under the rowing seat until they touched the feet of the captain forward. Sometimes, despite the efforts of the tired oarsmen, a wave came piling into the boat, and icy wave of the night, and the chilling water soaked them anew. They would twist their bodies for a moment and groan, and sleep the dead sleep once more, while the water in the boat gurgled about them as the craft rocked. The plan of the oiler and the correspondent was for one to row until he lost the ability, and then arouse the other from his seawater couch in the bottom of the boat. The oiler plied the oars until his head drooped forward, and the overpowering sleep blinded him, and he rowed yet afterward. Then he touched a man in the bottom of the boat and called his name. "Will you spell me for a little while?" he said meekly. "Sure, Billy," said the correspondent, awakening and dragging himself into the sitting position. They exchanged places carefully, and the oiler, cuddling down to the seawater at the cook's side, seemed to go to sleep instantly. The particular violence of the sea had ceased. The waves came without snarling. The obligation of the man at the oars was to keep the boat headed so the tilt of the rollers would not capsize her, and to preserve her from filling when the crests rushed past. The black waves were silent and hard to be seen in the darkness. Often one was almost upon the boat before the oarsman was aware. In a low voice, the correspondent addressed the captain. He was not sure that the captain was awake, although this iron man seemed to always be awake. "Captain, shall I keep her making for that light north, sir?" The same steady voice answered him. "Yes, keep it about 2 points off the port bow." The cook had tied a lifebelt around himself in order to get even the warmth which this clumsy cork contrivance could donate, and he seemed almost stove-like when a rower, whose teeth invariably chattered wildly as soon as he ceased his labour, dropped down to sleep. The correspondent, as he rowed, looked down upon the two men sleeping underfoot. The cook's arm was around the oiler's shoulders, and, with their fragmenty clothing and haggard faces, they were the babes of the sea, a grotesque rendering of the old babes in the wood. Later, he must have grown stupid for his work, for suddenly there was a growling of water, and a crest came with a roar and a swash into the boat, and it was a wonder that it did not set the cook afloat in his lifebelt. The cook continued to sleep, but the oiler sat up, blinking his eyes and shaking with the new cold. "Oh, I'm awful sorry, Billy," said the correspondent contritely. "That's all right, old boy," said the oiler, and lay down again and was asleep. Presently it seemed that even the captain dozed, and the correspondent thought that he was one man afloat upon all the oceans. The wind had a voice as it came over the waves, and it was sadder than the end. There was a long, loud swishing astern of the boat, and a gleaming trail of phosphorescence, like a blue flame, was furrowed upon the black waters. It might have been made by a monstrous knife. There came a stillness while the correspondent breathed with an open mouth and looked at the sea. Suddenly there was another swish and a long flash of bluish light, and this time it was alongside the boat, and might also have been reached with an oar. The correspondent saw an enormous fin speed through the shallow of the water, hurling the crystalline spray and leaving a long glowing trail. The correspondent looked over his shoulder at the captain. His face was hidden, and he seemed to be asleep. He looked at the babes of the sea. They certainly were asleep. So, being bereft of sympathy, he leaned a little way to one side and swore softly into the sea. But the thing did not then leave the vicinity of the boat. Ahead or astern, on one side or the other, at intervals long or short, fled the long sparkling streak, and there was to be heard the of the dark fin. The speed and power of the thing was greatly to be admired. It cut the water like a gigantic and keen projectile. The presence of this biting thing did not affect the man with the same horror that it would if he had been a picnicker. He simply looked at the sea dully and swore in an undertone. Nevertheless, it is true that he did not wish to be alone with the thing. He wished one of his companions to awaken by chance and keep him company with it. But the captain hung motionless over the water jar, and the oiler and the cook in the bottom of the boat slumber. If I am going to be drowned, if I am going to be drowned, if I am going to be drowned, why, in the name of the 7 mad gods who rule the sea, was I allowed to come thus far and contemplate the sand in the trees? During this dismal night, it may be remarked that a man would conclude that it really was the intention of the 7 mad gods to drown him, despite the abominable justice of it, for it was certainly an abominable injustice to drown a man who had worked so hard. The man felt it would be a crime most unnatural. Other people had drowned at sea since the galleys swarmed with painted sails, but still. When it occurs to a man that nature does not regard him as important, and that she feels she would not maim the universe by disposing of him, he at first wishes to throw bricks at the temple, and he hates deeply the fact that there are no bricks and no temples. Any visible expression of nature would surely be pelleted by his jeers. Then, if there be no tangible thing to hoot, he feels, perhaps, the desire to confront a personification and indulge in pleas, bowed on one knee and with hands supplicant, saying, "Yes, but I love myself." A high, cold star on a winter's night is the word he feels that she says to him. Thereafter he knows the pathos of his situation. The men in the dinghy had not discussed these matters, but each had, no doubt, reflected upon them in silence and according to his mind. There was seldom any expression upon their faces, save the general one of complete weariness. Speech was devoted to the business of the boat. To chime the notes of his emotion, a verse mysteriously entered into the correspondent's head. He had even forgotten that he had forgotten this verse, but it suddenly was in his mind. A soldier of the Legion lay dying in Algiers. There was lack of a woman's nursing. There was dearth of woman's tears. But a comrade stood beside him, and he took that comrade's hand and said, "I shall never see my own, my native land." In his childhood, the correspondent had been made acquainted with the fact that a soldier of the Legion lay dying in Algiers, but he had never regarded the fact as important. Myriads of his schoolfellows had informed him of the soldier's plight, but the dinning had naturally ended by making him perfectly indifferent. He had never considered it his affair that a soldier of the Legion lay dying in Algiers, nor had it appeared to him as a matter for sorrow. It was less to him than the breaking of a pencil's point. Now, however, it came to him as a human, living thing. It was no longer merely a picture of a few throes in the breast of a poet, meanwhile drinking tea and warming his feet at the grate. It was actually stern, mournful, and fine. The correspondent plainly saw the soldier. He lay on the sand with his feet out straight and still, while his pale left hand was upon his chest in an attempt to thwart the going of his life. The blood came between his fingers, and in the far Algerian distance, a city of low and square forms was set against a sky that was faint with the last sunset hues. The correspondent, plying the oars and dreaming of the slow and slower movements of the lips of the soldier, was moved by a profound and perfectly impersonal comprehension. He was sorry for the soldier of the Legion who lay dying in Algiers. The thing which had followed the boat and waited had evidently grown bored at the delay. There was no longer to be heard the slash of the cut water, and there was no longer the flame of the long trail. The light in the north still glimmered, but it was apparently no nearer the boat. Sometimes the boom of the surf rang in the correspondent's ears, and he turned the craft seaward and then rowed harder. Southward, someone had evidently built a watchfire upon the beach. It was too low and too far to be seen, but it made a shimmering roseate reflection upon the bluff back of it, and this could be discerned from the boat. The wind came stronger, and sometimes a wave suddenly raged out like a mountain cat, and there was to be seen the sheen and sparkle of a broken crest. The captain, in the bow, moved on his water jar and sat erect. "Pretty long night," he observed to the correspondent, and looked to the shore. "Those life-saving people sure do take their time." "Did you see that shark playing around?" "Yeah, I saw him. He was a big fellow, all right. Wish I'd known you were awake." Later, the correspondent spoke into the bottom of the boat. "Billy," there was a slow and gradual disentanglement. "Billy, will you spell me?" "Sure," said the oiler. As soon as the correspondent touched the cold, comfortable seawater in the bottom of the boat, and he had huddled close to the cook's lifebelt, he was deep in sleep, despite the fact that his teeth played out all the popular airs. This sleep was so good to him that it was but a moment before he heard a voice call his name in a tone that demonstrated the last stages of exhaustion. "Will you spell me?" "Sure, Billy." The light in the north had mysteriously vanished, but the correspondent took his course from the wide-awake captain. Later in the night, they took the boat further out to sea, and the captain directed the cook to take one oar out of the stern and keep the boat facing the seas. He was to call out if he should hear the thunder of the surf. This plan enabled the oiler and the correspondent to get respite together. "We'll give these boys a chance to get into shape again," said the captain. They curled down, and after a few preliminary chatterings and trembles, slept once more the dead sleep. Neither knew they had bequeathed to the cook the company of another shark, or perhaps the same shark. As the boat caroused on the waves, spray occasionally bumped over their skin and gave them all a fresh soaking, but this had no power to break their repose. The ominous slash of the wind and the water affected them as it would have affected mummies. "Boys," said the cook, with the note of every reluctance in his voice, "she's drifted in pretty close. I guess one of you had better take her out to sea again." Correspondent, aroused, heard the crash of the toppled crests. As he was rowing, the captain gave him some whiskey and water, and this steadied the chills out of him. "If I ever get ashore and anybody shows me even a photograph of an oar." At last there was a short conversation. "Billy, will you spell me?" "Sure," said the oiler. When the correspondent again opened his eyes, the sea and the sky were each of the grey hue of the dawning. Later, carmine and gold was painted upon the waters. The morning appeared finally in its splendour, with a sky of pure blue, and the sunlight flamed on the tips of the waves. On the distant dunes were set many little black cottages, and a tall white windmill reared above them. No man, nor dog, nor bicycle appeared on the beach. The cottages might have formed a deserted village. The voyagers scanned the shore. A conference was held in the boat. "Well," said the captain, "if no help is coming, we might better try a run through the surf right away. If we stay out here much longer, we'll be too weak to do anything for ourselves at all." The others silently acquiesced in the reasoning. The boat was headed for the beach. The correspondent wondered if none ever ascended the tall wind tower, and if then they never looked seaward. This tower was giant, standing with its back to the plight of the ants. It represented in a degree to the correspondent the serenity of nature amid the struggles of the individual. Nature in the wind, and nature in the vision of men. She did not seem cruel to him, nor beneficent, nor treacherous, nor wise, but she was indifferent, flatly indifferent. It is perhaps plausible that a man in this situation, impressed with the unconcern of the universe, should see the innumerable flaws of his life and have them taste wickedly in his mind and wish for another chance. A distinction between right and wrong seems absurdly clear to him. Then, in this new ignorance of the grave edge, and he understands that if he were given another opportunity, he would mend his conduct and his words, and would be better and brighter during an introduction, or at a tea. "Now, boys," said the captain, "she is going to swamp, sure. All we can do is work her in as far as possible, and when she swamps, pile out and scramble for the beach. Keep cool now, and don't jump in until she swamps shore." The oiler took the oars. Over his shoulder he scanned the surf. "Captain," he said, "I think I'd better bring her about and keep her head on to the seas and back her in." "All right, Billy," said the captain, "back her in." The oiler swung the boat, then seated in the stern, the cook and the correspondent were obliged to look over their shoulders to contemplate the lonely and indifferent shore. The monstrous inshore rollers heaved the boat high until the men were enabled to see the white sheets of water scuttling up the slanted beach. "We won't get in very close," said the captain. Each time a man could wrest his attention from the rollers, he turned his glance towards the shore, and in the expression of the eyes during this contemplation there was a singular quality. The correspondent, observing the others, knew that they were not afraid, but the full meaning of their glances was shrouded. As for himself, he was too tired to grapple fundamentally with the fact. He tried to coerce his mind to thinking of it, but the mind was dominated at this time by the muscles, and the muscles said they did not care. It merely occurred to him that if he should drown, it would be a shame. There were no hurried words, no pallor, no plain agitation. The men simply looked at the shore. "Now, remember to get well clear of the boat when you jump," said the captain. Seaward, the crest of a roller suddenly fell with a thunderous crash, and the long white comber came roaring down upon the boat. "Steady now," said the captain. The men were silent. They turned their eyes from the shore to the comber and waited. The boat slid up an incline, leaped at the furious top, bounced over it, and swung down the back of the waves. Some water had been shipped, and the cook bailed it out. But the next crest crashed also. The tumbling, boiling flood of white water caught the boat and whirled it almost perpendicular. Water swarmed in from all sides. The correspondent had his hands on the gunwale at the time, and when the water entered that place, he swiftly withdrew his fingers, as if he objected to wetting them. The little boat, drunken with this weight of water, reeled and snuggled deeper into the sea. "Bail her out, cook, bail her out," said the captain. "All right, captain," said the cook. "Now, boys, the next one will do us for sure," said the oiler. "Mind to jump clear of the boat." The third wave moved forward, huge, furious, implacable. It fairly swallowed the dinghy, and almost simultaneously the men tumbled into the sea. A piece of lifebelt had lain in the bottom of the boat, and as the correspondent went overboard, he held this to his chest with his left hand. The January water was icy, and he reflected immediately that it was colder than he had expected to find off the coast of Florida. This appeared to his dazed mind as a fact important enough to be noted at that time. The coldness of the water was sad. It was tragic. This fact was somehow mixed and confused with his opinion of his own situation, that it seemed almost a proper reason for tears. The water was cold. And when he came to the surface, he was conscious of little but the noisy water. Afterward, he saw his companions in the sea. The oiler was ahead in the race. He was swimming strongly and rapidly. Off to the correspondent's left, the cook's great white and corked back bulged out of the water, and in the rear, the captain was hanging with his one good hand on the keel of the overturned dinghy. There is a certain immovable quality to a shore, and the correspondent wondered at it amid the confusion of the sea. It seemed also very attractive, but the correspondent knew that it was a long journey, and he paddled leisurely. The piece of the life preserver lay under him, and sometimes he whirled down the incline of a wave as if he were on a hand sled. But finally he arrived at a place in the sea where travel was beset with difficulty. He did not pause swimming to inquire what manner of current had caught him, but there his progress ceased. The shore was set before him like a bit of scenery on a stage, and he looked at it and understood in his eyes each detail of it. As the cook passed much further to the left, the captain was calling to him, "Turn over on your back, cook. Turn over on your back and use the oar." "All right, sir," called the cook on his back, and paddled with an oar. Went ahead as if he were a canoe. Presently, the boat also passed to the left of the correspondent, with the captain clinging with one hand to the keel. He would have appeared like a man raising himself to look over a board fence, if it were not for the extraordinary gymnastics of the boat. The correspondent marvelled that the captain could still hold on to it. They passed on, nearer to the shore, the oiler, the cook, the captain, and following them went the water jar, bouncing gaily over the seas. The correspondent remained in the grip of this strange new enemy, a current. The shore, with its white slope of sand and its green bluff, topped with little silent cottages, was spread like a picture before him. It was very near to him then, but he was impressed as one who in a gallery looks at a scene from Brittany or Algiers. He thought, am I going to drown? Can it be possible? Can it be possible? Can it be possible? Perhaps an individual must consider his own death to be the final phenomenon of nature. But later, a wave perhaps whirled him out of the small, deadly current, for he found suddenly that he could again make progress towards the shore. Later still, he was aware that the captain, clinging with one hand to the keel of the dinghy, had his face turned away from the shore and toward him, and was calling his name, "Come to the boat! Come to the boat!" In his struggle to reach the captain and the boat, he reflected that when one gets properly wearied, drowning must really be a comfortable arrangement, a cessation of hostilities, accompanied by a large degree of relief, and he was glad of it, for the main thing in his mind, for some moments, had been the horror of the temporary agony. He did not wish to be hurt. Presently, he saw a man running along the shore. He was undressing with the most remarkable speed. Coat, trousers, shirt, everything flew magically off him. "Come to the boat," called the captain. "All right, captain." As the correspondent paddled, he saw the captain let himself down to the bottom and leave the boat. Then the correspondent performed his one little marvel of the voyage. A large wave caught him and flung him with ease and at supreme speed completely over the boat and far beyond it. It struck him even then as an event in gymnastics and a true miracle of the sea. An overturned boat in the surf is not a plaything to a swimming man. The correspondent arrived in water that reached only to his waist, but his condition did not enable him to stand for more than a moment. Each wave knocked him to a heap, and the undertow pulled at him. Then he saw the man who had been running and undressing and running, came bounding into the water. He dragged ashore the cook, and then waded toward the captain, but the captain waved him away, and sent him to the correspondent. He was naked as a tree in winter, but had a halo about his head, and he shone like a saint. He gave a strong pull and a long drag, and a bully heave at the correspondent's hand. The correspondent, schooled in minor formulae, said, "Thanks, old man," but suddenly the man cried, "What's that?" He pointed a finger. The correspondent said, "Go." In the shallows, face downward, lay the oiler. His forehead touched sand that was periodically, between each wave, clear of the sea. The correspondent did not know all that transpired afterwards. When he achieved safe ground, he fell, striking the sand with each particular part of his body. It was as if he had dropped from a roof, but the thud was grateful to him. It seemed that instantly the beach was populated with men with blankets, clothes and flasks, and women with coffee pots and all the remedies sacred to their minds. The welcome of the land to the men of the sea was warm and generous, but a still and drifting shape was carried slowly up the beach, and the land's welcome for it could only be the different and sinister hospitality of the grave. When it came night, and the white waves paced to and fro in the moonlight, and the wind brought the sound of the great sea's voice to the men on shore, and they felt that they could be interpreters. You have been listening to The Open Boat by Stephen Crane. Remember that you can find the whole continuous story over on our Gumroad, or come and join us on Patreon. Thank you. Sleep well.